Not everyone walking around on this planet has a soul. Yeah, I said it. Not everyone you see around you is as alive as you think. This isn't some theory pulled out of nowhere. It's a harsh reality that some beings are essentially just going through the motions. These are the ones who look human, talk human, even act human, but they're not. They're empty shells, no real awareness, no inner spark, no soul driving their actions. This idea isn't new. It's been around for ages, and it was laid bare by Edgar Cayce, the man who delved deep into the hidden truths of human existence according to him. Not everyone inhabiting a human body has a soul attached to it. Some are just placeholders. How many times have you encountered people who are incapable of empathy, who can't seem to grasp the weight of real emotional or spiritual experience? These aren't just bad people. They're not people in the way you and I think of it. They're not spiritually evolved. They're just walking, talking, biological machines with no consciousness beyond basic functions. You know the type there. Theons who blindly follow orders, who live only for material gain, who can never truly connect with anything deeper than their own reflection. They don't have the depth or capacity for higher thought. There's nothing inside but a void. You'll find them everywhere in the boardrooms, in government offices, in your personal life. They're the ones with zero ability to see beyond their own needs, the ones who could destroy everything around them without a second thought, yet never stop to question the purpose of it all. They go to work, they pay taxes, they buy stuff, but inside it's empty. No spiritual growth, no awareness of the deeper forces at play. And you can bet they're not aware of the soul trap that ensnares everyone else. They're the perfect candidates for the system's manipulation. They're already plugged into it, but they don't even know it now. I know you're thinking, but they look like us. They're just like us. Sure, on the surface, but on the inside, not a chance. And here's the kicker. They don't need to be aware. They don't need to think deeply. They don't need to ask questions. They are not like you. They are not on a spiritual journey. They've got no soul contract to fulfill. They are simply existing. No soul means no real individualization. These beings don't have access to the higher consciousness that connects you to the source of all things. They are in essence programmed to exist within the material realm and nothing more. Cayce wasn't the only one who pointed this out. Ancient texts, sacred writings, even the teachings of Gnosticism have been warning us for centuries about these beings. Those who exist within the system but are incapable of stepping outside of it. They're tools, extensions of the material matrix existing as part of the illusion. The Gnostics called them Helix beings who are entirely material and have no access to the spiritual realm. In other words, these people are here. Yes, but they aren't really here in the way you and I understand it. They're just a part of the system. You could even argue they're the system's enforcers. You think about the world around you. What if this system we're trapped in is populated by these beings? What if most of the people you interact with on a daily basis are empty shells, merely keeping the gears of the matrix running? It's a terrifying thought, but one that might actually explain the nature of the world we live in. The disconnect, the lack of empathy, the endless consumerism. They don't need to evolve. Spiritually, they just need to keep everything functioning as it is. Their job is simple. Stay in line, follow the rules, and make sure the rest of us stay in the dark. They're not enemies. Not in the way we usually think. They're just placeholders there to keep the system intact. Let's cut the crap and go straight into what ancient Egyptian texts actually said. Because they knew things that modern institutions would rather bury under centuries of dogma. According to the Egyptians, being biologically alive wasn't enough. Breathing, walking, eating. That didn't mean you were spiritually alive in their system. A fully realized being needed 3 distinct parts: the Ka, the Ba, and the Ark. And here's where it gets serious. Most people didn't make it to Ark. Most didn't even come close. The Ka was just your life force. Think of it like a battery. You could be running around with a full charge and still be spiritually irrelevant. The Ba was your personality, your traits, your quirks that's cute, but it doesn't get you out of the trap. The ark that was there, all deal, that was your transfigured soul, your divine light, and without it, you were just another participant in the machine. So many people walking around today wouldn't qualify for that third level. They're running on KA and maybe BA if they've developed any self-awareness at all. But Archie, don't make me laugh. That's earned. That's transformation. That's not handed out like candy at a Sunday service. And ancient Egypt made that crystal clear. They even built entire spiritual roadmaps, the Book of the Dead, the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, all obsessed with one thing: becoming Ark. You had to pass through the underworld, face judgment, prove you weren't weighed down by ignorance, corruption, or spiritual inertia. This was their operating system for human consciousness. The dead weren't resting in peace. They were being sorted, filtered, judged. Only the awakened advanced the rest. They were recycled, dumped back into the system, or worse, trapped. In a state of spiritual dormancy, it wasn't about punishment, it was about design. They knew damn well that not every person walking the earth came from the same place, carried the same essence, or had the same purpose. There were levels. And guess what? Most people don't even hit level 1 now. Let's get into the meat of it. The Egyptians practiced spiritual discernment. They didn't treat everyone like some divine snowflake. That's modern garbage thinking. They didn't assume every being was sacred or had a shot at the afterlife. You had to earn that. They trained for it. They prepared for it. They constructed entire lives around it. Meanwhile, we're out here giving everyone a participation trophy and calling it a soul. That's not how it works according to their system. Your soul wasn't guaranteed, it was cultivated. It was built through initiation, through trials, through suffering and wisdom and revelation, not through birth. And let's not forget this part: there were rituals specifically designed to distinguish the real from the false. The ancient priests weren't performing theater, they were executing protocols to access the unseen and identify who had potential for Ark and who didn't. If someone died without developing it, they weren't seen as tragic. They were seen as unfinished, as failed, as spiritually inert. You can cry about fairness all you want, but that's how they saw it. And in their eyes, there were many who lived entire lives and never even got close to becoming a true soul. They were just temporary vessels operating out of instinct and programming. So when modern people try to paint this picture that every single human is some kind of divine, eternal being, just by default, sorry, that's not how the ancients saw it, and honestly, it doesn't match reality either. You know it, you've seen it, you've felt it. Some people just aren't there. They function, sure, but there's nothing deeper. No spark, no drive for transcendence, no connection to anything beyond themselves. And the Egyptians would have looked at those people and said, empty, not evil, not malicious, just spiritually empty. The Gnostics weren't playing games when they classified humanity. They didn't bother sugarcoating it, and neither should we. According to them, humanity isn't one unified species with equal spiritual potential. It's divided, cut right down the middle, into 3 types of beings: Helic, psychic, and pneumatic. Now pay attention, because this isn't spiritual fluff. It's a brutal breakdown of who's real, who's lost, and who's never even had a shot. The Helics, those are the lowest material, obsessed, dead inside. Soul absent placeholders. The psychics, middle of the road, capable of developing awareness but still locked into duality. And pneumatics, the awakened ones, the real ones, the ones with access to the divine spark. Let's be clear, the Helics are everywhere. They run your cities, your corporations, your governments, your schools. They look like people, they sound like people, but they are driven entirely by matter, survival, sex, status consumption. That's it, nothing deeper. No spiritual awareness, no curiosity, no inner conflict about right or wrong, just programming. They're not struggling with meaning because they're incapable of perceiving it. They're not searching for truth. because their internal system doesn't register the concept. It's like trying to get a vending machine to read Shakespeare. And the Gnostics weren't the rising. They were documenting a pattern that still plays out today. Every single day, most of the population are Hylix biological entities with no higher component. You can hand them wisdom on a silver plate and they'll ignore it for a dopamine hit. You can show them the system enslaving them and they'll defend it. Not because they're dumb, but because they're structurally incapable of transcendence. They're not here to evolve. They're here to maintain the simulation. They are the firewall of the matrix. They enforce the rules without knowing what they're doing. They aren't evil, they are empty. And then there's the psychics. These people at least have a shot. They can wake up. They feel the tension, they know something's wrong, but they don't always know what they're still stuck in the rules of religion, morality, cultural identity, but they can be pulled out. The Gnostic said these are the ones who can be converted, initiated, evolved, but it takes trauma loss, awakening a complete system collapse to push them through. That's why most people who wake up spiritually do so after everything falls apart. That destruction clears the path to break from the psychic level into the pneumatic. Now the pneumatics, this is the top tier, the ones who were never fully asleep, the ones who carry something ancient inside them. These are not just people with beliefs or good vibes. These are the disruptors, the visionaries, the heretics, the ones who see through the entire system for what it is. The Gnostics saw them as fragments of divine consciousness itself, thrown into the world of matter, trapped in flesh, suffocating in illusion, but still capable of remembering who they are. That's rare, extremely rare, and most people claiming to be awakened are not in this category. The pneumatics are real and rare. You won't find them on trending spirituality feeds. You find them in isolation, in exile, or speaking truth. Noon wants to hear, let's talk about the elephant in the room that no one wants to admit. This culture worships bodies, not beings. These skin, you're born with a pulse and a brain. Society labels you human and assumes you've got a soul, no questions asked. That's the baseline assumption. If you look the part, you are the part. It's lazy, it's dangerous, and it's flat out wrong. Because once you strip away the superficial definitions, biological functions, cognitive skills, social behavior, you're left with a very uncomfortable question. Is there anything conscious behind those eyes most of the time? No, you're dealing with an interface, a system operator, a meat soup that knows how to respond to stimuli and mimic connection, but the actual self not present. The spiritual gatekeepers of the past didn't make that mistake. They didn't call everyone divine. They had a process, a brutal one, for determining who had real soul potential and who was just here to fill space. Modern society flipped that on its head. Now the assumption is universal divinity. Every person is treated like a sacred vessel of cosmic importance just because they exist. That's not spirituality. That's infantilization. It's a feel-good narrative to keep people compliant, to discourage critical thinking, and to erase the fundamental truth. Consciousness is earned, not distributed like oxygen. And don't act surprised. Look around. You've seen people who seem like they're just running code. You speak to them and it's like hitting a wall. No inner depth, no spark, no self-reflection, just responses, programmed reactions, surface-level chatter. They've got no curiosity, no hunger for truth, no ability to process nuance. That's not a soul, that's a machine, following scripts. The worst part, these people aren't rare. They make up the majority. They pass every IQ test, follow every rule, climb every ladder, and still there's nothing behind it but reward-seeking behavior and social mimicry. Their success is mechanical, not conscious. Ancient systems didn't give Adam about how well you conformed. They measured your soul by how well you could break through illusion. And guess what? Most people didn't qualify. That wasn't seen as harsh. It was seen as reality. There were rituals, initiations, orals, You had to prove your spiritual structure, not just your biological existence failing. That meant you were spiritually undeveloped. You could be kind, polite, hardworking, and still be spiritually irrelevant. That's the part that modern thinking can't handle. Being a good person doesn't equal having a soul, having a job, a family, a personality. None of that means there's a real being behind the curtain, and it's not just about awakening. Some people don't even have the latent capacity to awaken. They don't have the structure for it. They weren't built for that function, and that's a hard pill to swallow because we've been conditioned to believe everyone has equal potential. They don't. That's not how nature works. That's not how reality works. And that's definitely not how consciousness works. There's a hierarchy. There are levels, and pretending otherwise just makes you easier to control these people. These non-soul placeholders are fully integrated into the system. They reinforce it. They celebrate it. They protect it, not because they're evil masterminds, but because they literally can't perceive that there's anything wrong with it. The system is their God. Structure is their salvation. Order, repetition, obedience. These are the highest virtues for them. Why? Because their inner world is empty. There's no friction, no resistance, no internal war between truth and illusion. There's just compliance, and that makes them perfect. Tools for a world that punishes depth and rewards conformity. You try to talk to them about the soul and it bounces off. Try to explain spiritual awakening and they glaze over. Try to expose the trap we're in, and they get defensive. Not because you're threatening their beliefs, but because you're breaking their script. They don't have beliefs, they have protocols. They're not contemplating existence, they are executing lines of behavioral code. And no, this isn't some sci-fi metaphor. This is how the system actually functions. The simulation isn't digital with spiritual. And these people are its NPCs. The Tan Book of the Dead doesn't waste time sugarcoating death. It doesn't give you the sanitized Western version where you float into a white light and your dead relatives throw you a welcome party. No, it describes a brutal, chaotic, high-stakes transition between lives that separates conscious beings from unconscious reboots. And here's the kicker. Most people don't choose their next life. They're pulled into it like trash getting sucked into a cosmic vacuum. You're not reincarnating because you're evolving. You're reincarnating because you're stuck, because you didn't wake up last time or the time before that, or the 20 cycles before that. You're not ascending. You're recycling. In Tibetan esotericism, the soul, or what they call the consciousness principle, has a chance, a tiny window to break out of the loop. But it requires presence, clarity, awareness, and that's where 90% of people fail because they never developed those traits in life. They were too busy being reactive, passive, emotionally driven, biological systems. So when death hits, they get hit with overwhelming visuals, karmic projections, and fake guides that lead them straight into another birth. That's not transcendence, that's spiritual gravity. You fall right back into the trap thinking it's your destiny. It's not. It's a default setting for unawakened consciousness according to this system. Just having a human body doesn't mean you're spiritually advanced. Most people didn't get their current life by choice. They got pulled in by karma, by ignorance, by attachment, by unconscious momentum. Think about that. You're surrounded every day by people who didn't choose to be here. They didn't come here with purpose. They didn't incarnate with a mission. They were dropped in because they didn't make the cut last time, and guess what? They'll fail again over and over because nothing in their structure compels them to awaken. They're just passengers being tossed around by the same storm every lifetime. And you wonder why people repeat the same patterns, generation after generation. This isn't just bad habits. It's a metaphysical rut. These are beings without direction. Not because they're bad, but because they don't have the internal mechanisms to evolve. In Tibetan terms, they're trapped in samsara. Not philosophically, but literally. These aren't souls on a journey. They're programs looping until the code burns out. They're not meant to reach enlightenment. They're here to populate the structure, reinforce the rules, keep the illusion intact. They are the crowd, the default setting, the background noise of the reincarnation machine. And when you confront this idea, modern spirituality panics because it's been selling the fantasy that everyone is on their path, but not everyone has a path. Some just have patterns. They move through life like water through a gutter. Wherever the slope leads, they go. That's not divine will. That's inertia. And when death comes, that same inertia drives them right back in. These are the beings who see the tunnel of light and sprint into it without a single thought. Not because it's salvation, but because it's familiar, and the system knows that it's designed for them. It rewards their compliance by handing them another round of the same prison with a new name. And face these same traditions make it clear only those with real spiritual discipline who cultivate awareness before death have even a chance to escape, and most people, they don't even know. They're supposed to be preparing for that moment. They're living paycheck to paycheck, dopamine hit to dopamine hit, completely oblivious to the fact that their death will not be some peaceful fade to black. It'll be another reroute into another meat suit, another set of illusions, another fake life with no memory of the last one. That's not reincarnation, that's a factory reset. Plato didn't waste his time pretending all souls were equal. He straight up said it in Timaeus. Only the most spiritually refined get to be reborn as humans. Everyone else downgraded, thrown into lower life forms. And let's be clear, he wasn't talking about punishment. He was talking about cosmic order. The soul is measured by its level of awareness, not by its ability to breathe and talk and post on social media. You had to earn the human form, you had to fight for it, evolve into it. But today we act like being born human automatically means you're some enlightened entity with a destiny. That's not philosophy, that's delusion. Most people are not here because they chose to be. That's modern spiritual fantasy designed to protect egos. Plato's model destroys that idea completely. He made it very clear. If you didn't cultivate reason, if you didn't discipline your soul, you dropped. You got thrown into a body. You didn't choose living, a life that didn't belong to you, surrounded by illusions you couldn't escape. And in that world, most of what we call humans are just failed iterations of something higher. That's the dirty secret. You're not looking at a planet full of ascending souls. You're looking at a system recycling the leftovers. This concept pisses people off because it kills the feel-good lie that everyone is here on a sacred journey. No, some people are just filling roles. Plato saw that, the Greeks saw that the soul had to be trained, purified, elevated. And if it wasn't, it regressed. Simple. You dropped back into form, back into matter, and had to start from zero. You didn't get a participation trophy. You got downgraded into matter that served the machine. And here's the brutal part. Most people don't even question why they're here, because they don't have the capacity to. They weren't given that function. They're not designed to ask, they're designed to follow you. Look around today and it's obvious. You think these people walking around obsessed with consumption, control, and compliance are highly evolved beings. You think they came here out of divine intent. They were placed, recycled, slotted into a program that keeps the structure moving. Not everyone has an inner dialogue. Not everyone wrestles with morality. Not everyone questions existence, and Plato would have told you flat out. They are not fully human. They are humanoid. They carry the shape, but not the spark. They wear the costume, but not the content. This is the part modern society can't handle, because it forces you to admit the obvious. Just because someone looks like you doesn't mean they are like you. We've built a civilization on the assumption that everyone shares the same interior depth. That's a lie. That's how control systems stay intact. They need you to think you're all equals in essence, so you'll never question why some people seem incapable of insight, growth, or change. They're not broken, they're just built differently. Their soul didn't qualify for higher knowledge. It didn't reach the threshold, and now it's back stuck in a loop performing the role of a person in a world full of roles across esoteric traditions. There's a recurring theme that hits hard once you connect the dots. Not everyone has a soul in development. Some just don't have it, period. There's no inner spark, no driver, no observer behind the eyes. They function, they talk, they emulate emotion, but it's mimicry. It's surface level. It's scripted behavior with zero internal processing beyond social feedback. And you felt this. You've met people where the conversation never goes past weather, sports, gossip. Try going beyond that and you hit a wall. That's not an accident, that's design. These aren't sleeping souls. They are empty shells fully adapted to the system, perfect for maintaining the illusion, absolutely useless for anything beyond it. They can say, "I love you." Color. They can't create funerals, they can post selfies in front of temples, but ask them to define consciousness. Silence. Ask them about the nature of reality. Defensiveness. Ask them why they exist. Confusion. That's because they're not participating in existence. They're reacting to it. They don't process the world. They echo it, and that's what separates soul beings from placeholders. A soul questions. A soul breaks patterns. A soul resists programming. Placeholders comply. They're not fighting the system. They are the system walking around in human skin. The term soulless isn't metaphorical here. It's literal. You're not dealing with bad people. You're dealing with non-persons, entities that were never individuated, never pulled from the source, never activated. They don't reject higher consciousness. They don't even know it exists. You can't wake them up because there's nothing to wake up. There's no observer behind the experience, just feedback loops running on instinct, social rules, and dopamine. That's why they're so good at copying, mimicking, fitting in. They've been programmed to blend, not to think, not to evolve, just to maintain structure. And that structure loves them because they don't question it. They follow the script without deviation. They reinforce norms. They vote for the system. They buy into every distraction. They are the reason it keeps working. Souled individuals destabilize the matrix. Soulless ones hold it together. Sagas. Who gets rewarded? Who gets pushed to the top of corporate ladders? Political parties, media empires, the ones who never challenge anything, the ones who play the role perfectly, the most human-looking non-humans out there. It's time to stop pretending. This is about intelligence or education. You've met PhDs who are dead inside. You've met artists who create without purpose. You've met leaders with zero depth. That's not failure, that's function. They're doing exactly what they were built to do. Keep the simulation running. Respond to external stimuli. Never ask why. Never break formation. Never see past the veil, and they'll fight anyone who does not. Because they understand the threat. Because their programming tells them to protect the system. Let's end this with brutal clarity. Most people aren't sold. And deep down, you already know that. You've seen it your entire life. The dead stare, the scripted conversations, the inability to process anything outside of pre-approved opinions, the overreaction to truth. These aren't anomalies. These are the standard you're living in. A world populated mostly by placeholders, functioning biological systems, built to maintain the illusion of humanity. And here's the kicker. They don't know they're placeholders. They're not hiding anything. There's nothing to hide. There's no one home. The system you live in is structured around this reality. That's why truth is ridiculed. That's why real consciousness is isolated, gaslit, or outright attacked. You're not surrounded by sleeping lions. You're surrounded by guard dogs who bark at anything that threatens the simulation. Their job isn't to wake up. It's to keep you asleep. They reinforce fake norms, vote for their own cage, and treat freedom like a threat. Not because they're evil, but because they're designed to protect the machine. They are the machine. They're running code, not asking questions. They don't care about reality. They care about structure, stability, familiarity, programmed comfort. And let's be honest, this realization is painful. It means your efforts to reach certain people were never going to work. It means you wasted time trying to ignite sparks. In Wetwood, you begged for understanding from people who can only imitate empathy. You poured your soul into people who didn't even have one, but now you see the pattern. Now you understand you're not here to save placeholders. You're here to recognize the field you're operating in, to navigate through noise and find the signal. And the signal is rare. It's buried, but it's real. You know that because you are at everything, and this reality has been set up to suppress that signal. Schools, media, religion, pop culture, none of it is built for soul-bearing beings. It's designed for repetition, consumption, conformity. That's why you feel like you don't belong, because you're not built to merge into a fake world. You're built to see it for what it is. And the minute you accept that, you stop wasting energy trying to bring the dead to life. You start moving with precision. You start speaking to those who can hear, not those who are just programmed to respond. And let me be clear, this isn't about superiority. This is about function. Some beings are not defective. They're just different. They're here to run systems, manage loops, fill the grid. That's their role, but you're here for something else: to question, to disrupt, to remember. And every time you try to act like everyone is the same inside, you're diluting your own signal. You're lowering yourself to speak a language that was never meant for you. It's time to stop doing that. Speak your language. The real ones will hear it. Theirs were never meant to. So next time you walk into a room, stop assuming you're surrounded by humans. You're surrounded by forms. Some are real, most aren't, and that's not cynical. That's clarity. That's how you survive in a world built on illusion, by seeing through it without apology, by understanding that truth doesn't need permission to exist, and neither do you. Thanks for watching. All the way to the end. I don't take that lightly. The ones who make it this far, you're not background noise, you're signal. You're exactly why this video exists. Stay sharp, stay real, and I'll see you in the next one.